Welcome to the Improved Garage YouTube channel. Today I've got an unboxing for you, and we'll talk about what I bought, why I bought it, some alternatives, what it's going to do for me, and why I'm excited about it. So it's not really much of a surprise what's in the box because Amazon shipped it in the box and didn't package it as something else, which I'm sure they tell me on my website or on the website is normal. So I purchased a QNAP, and this is a network attached storage device, or a NAS, N-A-S. They have a bunch of different ones available with different amounts of bays, different amounts of memory. They have a really large product line, so it can totally be confusing when you're trying to decide which one to buy, and there isn't one that's a one size fits all. It depends on what you're trying to do, what your goals are, how much storage you need, what you're trying to make it do. Some people make these into servers and they have them run all kinds of stuff. Some people are just using them for storage. The reason that I purchased this is because I want to connect it to my Mac Mini, and I want to replace a file storage location that I already have, which is another smaller one of these guys. So there's really two players when it comes to NAS, or two like good products that exist. There's lots of companies that make them. Netgear has them, Western Digital has them. There's a bunch of them out there, but really there's two good ones. There's QNAP and there's Synology. And everybody else isn't as good and is similar in cost. So if you're going to buy one, buy a QNAP or buy a Synology. Don't buy a Western Digital. Don't buy a Netgear Ready NAS. Don't buy any of that. They don't have the support that QNAP and Synology do. It's like buying a phone other than an Android or an iPhone. It's like if you went out and bought a Windows phone tomorrow. Like, why? There's just no reason for it. So I picked QNAP. Now Synology is a little bit easier to use. It's a little bit more intuitive for a new user. QNAP is a little bit more powerful. You have a little bit more options, more tuning settings, more things that you can tweak and adjust. Synology is kind of, it's not dumbed down, but they bury all of their advanced settings to make it really easy for a new user to navigate and have a good experience. Let me turn my light on so it don't look so dark. So I picked QNAP. I own both. I have two Synologies and I have a QNAP right now in my house, and there are things that I like about both of them. Honestly, I like QNAP better, but they're a 1 and a first and a 1.2. Like, they're very close to each other. So the model that I picked is an 8-bay or an 8-drive model, which means it will support up to 8 hard drives being installed simultaneously. Now, you don't need to install 8 hard drives at the very beginning. You can start off with 1. You can start off with 2. You can start off with 7. You can start off with whatever makes sense for you, but you can grow all the way to 8. And they make these from, I think the biggest ones are 16, the smallest ones are 1. And they go from $200 to $10,000. And at work we actually work with some of the big ones, the $10,000 ones, and they're awesome. We don't use them every day, but they're a pretty good product, and they tend to be pretty reliable. They come with a good warranty. You can extend the warranty out to 5 years. But in general, I don't see these things fail before 5 years anyway. So I'm really comfortable with the product, and I've owned 4 QNAPs at this point, and that was mostly growth. I went from a 4-bay to a 5-bay. I sold the 5-bay when I built my last server and went down the route of having my own Windows server, and that became a pain. Now I have a 2-bay in my house, and that 2-bay is running it's doing surveillance. It's running a video camera and storing the video for my camera. So I'll talk about that in a later video, because I have another camera that I'm going to be adding to the garage, and I'll get that all set up on this guy, and this will be running both video cameras because they can run I think 8 cameras, something like that. So this is the chassis, 8 bays in the front. I got a TS-832PX So what that means is it's an 8 bay. That's where the 8 comes from. So TS, they all start with TS. 8 is an 8 bay. 32 is the model line. P stands for PCI Express. It has a PCI Express slot in the back. And X means that it has 10 gig ports. So on the back, you'll see that there are 2 PCI Express spots. There's actually only 1 slot inside. It can have a double height card. That's why there's an extra room there. And then these are 10 gig SFPs. These are 1 gig Ethernet. And my Mac Mini, if you'll remember from that unboxing video, I purchased with 10 gig because I had this in mind. This was already going to be happening. So that is going to be connected to a 10 gig switch and to this, and it'll have 10 gig of connectivity, which is 10 times faster than 1 gig. And I won't have to worry about any bottlenecks or anything like that when I'm, editing videos, uploading videos, doing things like speeding up videos, going from 1x to 4x and trying to play through. All of that'll be really smooth. So if we look at what's included in the box, there's foam, there's a QNAP, there's a sticker on the top that gives me a serial number and a cloud key, and a service portal where I can go in and find the information about it. There is a power cord, and there's a cardboard box. And this cardboard box has extended warranty information, a quick installation guide, limited warranty info. So as a default, this has 1 year warranty. It can be extended out to 5. There's an Ethernet cable. Comes with some screws for hard drives, and there's a key, and the key unlocks these sleds in the front so that you can actually lock your hard drives in there. And they don't arrive locked. But so let's get a couple hard drives installed here, or we'll get 1 hard drive installed here just to kind of show you how it works. So these sleds are removable. That's what they call them. They're sleds. There's a sequence on top: 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's a sticker on the top. This comes out like this and releases, and you'll see that it's a quick release style sled. Now they have screws, so you can screw drives in too if you need to. If maybe they don't have standard screw holes, or you want to use small drives like 2.5-inch drives, you can do that. I've got a drive right here that I'm going to put in it. We'll talk about these in a different video, but this is a Western Digital, this is an UltraStar drive. So this is their 5-year warranty data center hard drive, UltraStar HC310, and it's a 6 terabyte drive. And I have a bunch of these in my server that are going to get moved over to this. So put that in, snap these in place, and then once those are snapped in place, we're going to take this, we're going to slide it into a place, and we're going to lock it. And that's it. It's installed. Nice and easy. And you can lock this by turning the screw on the front. All right, so we have a hard drive installed. So I'm going to power this on, and we'll get it plugged into the internet. So basically, you just plug it in, turn it on. And then I'll show you how to access it and how to do the initial setup, and we'll kind of go through that. Then I'll get the additional drives installed. We'll do a walkthrough on setting up the device, creating an array, all of that kind of stuff. One thing that I think is important to notice is the drives that I'm using in this case are these Western Digital 5-year warranty UltraStar drives. Now this is a brand new drive. I've had it sitting on the shelf for a while, so it's actually 2 years old almost. So I only have 3 years of warranty left. Oops. But I try to keep a spare, and they're what I run on my server. And I used to run the Western Digital Red drives. The Red drives have a 3-year warranty, and they are a consumer hard drive. And I ran into issues with, I had one fail, and while my array was rebuilding, I had a second one fail, and I lost a whole bunch of data, and I had to go and re-download videos and go through all of it again. And I had backups and was able to recover it, but it was a huge pain in the butt. So I've started only buying the data center hard drives, which are rated for more usage time, a higher mean time between failure, and their unrecoverable read errors 1/10 of what the other ones are. So they last significantly longer and they work significantly better and they're faster and they run cooler. So they're just kind of all around better. They're more money. One of these is about 200 bucks, it's 6 terabyte, and a red is like 140, 150 bucks. So it's, it's about 35% more, 33% more than a red is. But I think they're worth it. Losing your data sucks. And they're available in everything from a 1 terabyte all the way up to a 14 terabyte. At the time when I was buying them, 6 terabyte was reasonable and 8 terabyte was super expensive, so I just bought a bunch of 6s and I've kind of grown it over time, add a drive, add a drive, add a drive. And that's kind of the cool thing about one of these QNAP devices is you can grow them. If you start off with a 2-bay QNAP with 2 hard drives in it, and you decide that you need more storage down the road, you can buy a 4-bay, and you could take those 2 drives out, you put them in the 4-bay, and it actually brings all of your data and everything over with you. Then you just add 2 more drives, and you can expand it, now you've got twice the storage, which is awesome, or triple the storage, depending on how you have your RAID set up. In this case, I started out with an 8-bay because I have 8 6 terabyte drives in my server right now, and I've, over the last couple days, as I've waited for this device to come from Amazon, I've been moving my data off of my 8-bay server onto a couple, like 2 Synologies and a QNAP that are smaller that I borrowed from work just to kind of get the data somewhere else so that I could move my hard drives over and then move all of my data over. But we're going to set this up as though it's a brand new device. I'm not going to migrate anything over. It's just going to be brand new, fresh slate, and I'll talk through that. We'll talk through some of the capabilities of the device. We're going to do backups of Mac computers with Time Machine, so it'll be my backup source for Time Machine. We'll set it up to do surveillance video recording from a camera. It works with any camera that supports the OnVIF standard. So I have this Hikvision 265 camera here. It's just an outdoor dome camera. There are less expensive options on Amazon. I have a cheapo outside. It's AmpViz or something like that. It works fine. I'm just going to put this inside the garage because I'm worried about something walking at some point. I have one outside to kind of watch where my packages are dropped every day by FedEx or UPS or whoever comes, just to make sure that somebody doesn't walk up and snag one of my packages. The one inside my garage is going to be looking at the garage doors, and that's in case one of the kids leaves the garage doors open, or I leave the garage door open and I'm inside the house for a while and grabbing lunch or something. I come back out and something's missing. There's enough stuff in the garage that it might even take me a while to notice that something's missing. So we'll set it up for motion sensor, and it'll record when it sees motion, and it'll keep video for a long time. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a future video. So let me get this plugged in and we'll go through the basic setup. All right, so we've got the QNAP plugged in inside the house. Let's see if we can make it so the screen is readable. Okay. So you got the QNAP plugged in inside the house. I installed 5 of those 6 terabyte drives in it for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to QNAP. We need a software called QNAP Finder, which is a utility that QNAP offers, QFinder Pro. So there are other ways that you can do this. If you have access to your router or whatever, you can log in and check the DHCP leases and find what just took an IP, but this is the way that a non-technical person would do it. So I just downloaded the software, QFinder Pro. They make a Mac version, they make a Linux version, they make a Chrome plugin. There's a variety of ways that you can make this work. So no matter what you're using, Mac, Windows, Chromebook, you can run this software. And what it's going to do is it's going to scan my network and find any QNAP devices. Select your region, global, OK, allow access. All right, now like I mentioned earlier in the video, I have a couple QNAPs and a Synology or 2 here. So it found a new device, NAS 576B8. This is its IP address, 10.22170. This is the device type, TS-832PX, and the version of the software that it's running. Server is not initialized yet. Do you want the smart installation process to guide you through the configuration? Sure. Yes. Click Start to download the latest firmware and install it automatically. Start. The NAS finished its thing. Now it's rebooting. It's going to take about 3 minutes to do that. It actually doesn't take that long, but that's how long the page takes to refresh. So I'll wait for it to reconnect. So now the device reconnected. So the first thing it asks you to do is to check your warranty, and you can go online and do that. Start Smart Installation. Current firmware is 4.5.4.1750. It automatically downloaded this from the internet. That's the latest available version, so I can't even update it. If I check for update, it'll say the current version is up to date. I can also choose to upload an older version if I want to run an older firmware. Choose Next. It's going to ask me to name my QNAP. I can call this whatever I want to. Call it something witty like QNAP, or, NAS, or whatever. So I'm just going to call it QNAP. It's going to ask you to create a password for it. Type it twice. Choose Next. What is your time zone? I am Pacific time. And I want it to synchronize with an internet time server automatically, so it will automatically sync with pool.ntp.org, which is the time server that most computers use. Next. Do I want to set a static IP address or have it get an IP address automatically? So in a lot of cases, when you're running it as a server, you're going to want to set a static. At this point, I'm just going to do IP manual or automatically with the HCP, because that's what your average person that is watching this video would probably be doing. Enable the following OS features to assist you in doing a cross-platform file management, sharing, and transfer. Multiple choices are allowed. So do you want to allow Windows? Yes, no. Do you want to allow Apple? Yes, no. And you can choose just one, or you can choose multiple. You have to have at least one chosen. So I'm going to add all of them. I have Windows computers, I have Mac computers, I might have a Linux computer here shortly. So hit Next. So we have a name, a user, a password, time settings are done. I set the network to be DHCP, and I enabled file sharing for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and I can edit all those settings right here. Apply, initialize. So this is going to set everything up as a brand new device. When you log in for the first time, it's going to bring up some things. Help Center sets up, provides valuable resources for you to learn about your NAS. There is this Help Center that's here where you can search different topics. There's a manual and online resources. There's a help desk where they provide you support, QNAP support. I've never used it. I know some people who have, and they've told me it's good, but I honestly can't comment on it. No volumes or storage pools. To start using your NAS, you must create a storage pool and a volume. Okay. So it's automatically going to open the storage manager. Tells you a little bit about storage pools and snapshots and volumes. You can read through here and try to understand it. But basically, a storage pool is a group of disks that are set up together to be a pool of storage. And then a volume is something that you create that can share out of that storage pool data to people. So it comes up with this create storage pool wizard, create a storage pool, and do you want to enable Qtier? So I'll talk about Qtier in a minute, but so I threw a couple different disks in here that are different capacities just to kind of show what this device can do. So what I have in here, I have two 6 terabyte disks. So disk 1 is a 6, then there's a 4, a 4, a 4, a 4. Disk 6 is a 6, and then I have two 500 gig SSDs in here. So I have 2 6s, 4 4s, and 2 500 gig SSDs, which is a really strange combination. It's not what I'm going to be using permanently. But I want to talk about kind of what you can do and can't do with this device, and I thought that would be a good way to show. So you can create a storage pool with just one disk. If you buy a one disk NAS, you have no choice. So a single disk is going to have itself as the capacity. So if I choose one disk, single, 5.45 terabytes of capacity. That's what I'm going to have available to me. It's a 6 terabyte disk. I'll have 5.45 available because of the conversion factor. And when you take if you don't know this, when you take a 1 terabyte disk and you plug it into Windows, you'll see that it's only 931 gigs, and that's because operating systems view a byte as 1024, and a hard drive manufacturer views a byte as 1,000. So to a hard drive manufacturer, a terabyte is a billion bytes. To an operating system manufacturer, it's 1024 times 1024 times 1024, not 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000, if that makes sense. So a single disk is going to allow you to have its capacity. Now, if you're going to 2 disks, so let's select both of the 6 terabyte disks. So I've got 2 6s. Now I have the options to do RAID 0, which means it's going to span those drives. So it's going to take your data, it's going to put half of it on one drive and half of it on the other drive. If you lose any one of those drives, you lose your data, but you get twice the capacity, 10.9 terabytes. RAID 0 is really a performance RAID. It's designed to be very, very fast, but there's no redundancy. RAID 1 is a mirror. So if you put your 2 disks in a RAID 1, you're going to have capacity equal to one of the disks, whichever one is the smaller. So in this case, I have 2 6 terabyte disks. My capacity is 5.45, but I can lose one disk and still have all of my data and just replace the disk and it'll rebuild. If you go to 3 disks, so let's do 3 of these 4s, you have the option to do a RAID 5. So a RAID 5 is going to mean that you could lose one of the 3 disks. So there's 2 disks with data and 1 disk with parity. Well, they distribute parity, but basically you end up with, if I have 3 4 terabyte disks in a RAID 5, I end up with a little over 7 terabytes of space. You lose 1 disk worth of capacity. When you go to 4 disks, that's when you get a bunch of options. So if we go to 4 disks, 4 4s, I can do RAID 5, which means that I can lose 1 disk, but I can't lose 2. I can lose 1 disk and I can replace it and rebuild. And I've got about 11 terabytes of storage available from my 4 4s. If I go to RAID 6 means I can lose 2 disks. So I've got 2 disks with parity and 2 disks with data. So my 4 4s become 7.26 terabytes of usable data. When I go out to 8 drives, I'd use RAID 6. That's my normal setup. And that just means that, because if you lose a disk and you replace the disk, it takes about a day to rebuild a 6 terabyte disk, just because of all the data that needs to transfer to it. So if you're rebuilding for a day and you lose a second disk during that process, you lose all of your data. So RAID 6 just gives you the ability to lose a second disk and not be as much strain on the other disks that are trying to rebuild the one that failed. And then you also have the option for RAID 10, which is basically 2 zeros that are mirrored. So you end up with a 0, and they mirror those 2. So you end up with half of the capacity with that. So if you have 8 disks in a RAID 6, you get the total capacity minus 2 disks. So 6 times whatever your disks are. So if I had 8 disks that were all 6 terabyte disks, 8 times 6 is 48, but I lose 2 of them, so I end up with 6 times 6, which is 36. If you go with RAID 10, then what that means is you end up with half of your capacity. So 8 times 6 is 48, 8 disks, 6 terabytes, 48, but I only end up with 4 of them, which means I have 24. So there are all these different ways that you can set it up, and the device allows a lot of flexibility. So if I had 4 4s and 2 6s, which I have in here, I can actually select all of them. I can make a RAID 6, and it's going to treat those 6 terabyte disks like they're 4 terabyte disks. So I don't get to use every bit of them, but it's going to act like I have 6 4s in there instead of having a bunch of 6s. So that can be useful, you know, if you're trying to grow, for example, like maybe you've had all these 4 terabyte disks and over time you're trying to replace them with 6 terabytes and grow the amount of data that you have, or you're going from 6s to 10s or whatever. You know, you have the ability to grow. So, you know, it shows that I've got 14.52 terabytes of capacity, which is equal to 6 times 4, 24, minus 2 of the disks because I'm in a RAID 6. So that's 4 times 4, which is 16, which means I have 14.52 available. So I can pick whatever I want to. Now, this also has something called Qtier, which we're going to go back to. So I want to enable Qtier. So with Qtier, the device is smart enough to know what data you access most often. So you can make a tier with SSD disks, solid state disks, and you can make a tier with slow drives like spinning hard drives. And actually there's one in the middle too where you can use SAS disks. The device that I purchased doesn't support SAS. There are enterprise ones that do, but the operating system is the same regardless. So in my case, I can use SSD and I can do SATA. So I can have big storage, but have it be really fast. And it does this automatic tiering where it puts the most accessed data in the SSD tier so it's rapidly accessible. So we could try setting that up because I put a couple SSDs in here. So if we go here, it's going to say, select and configure disks, tier ultra high speed SSD. So I pick my 2 SSDs and it's going to make a capacity of 467.44 gigabytes. Now I can choose again RAID 0 or RAID 1. It makes more sense to do RAID 1 than it does to do RAID 0 because you don't want to lose data. And then you hit next, and then it's going to ask for your capacity tier. So let's say I pick up my other 6 disks, which were the 14.52 terabytes. So what that means is I end up with 14.98 terabytes. And it just tells you the disks you've selected have different capacities. Some of the disk space on the disks will not be used. Are you sure you want to continue? And that's talking about the 6 terabyte disks that I have, which are obviously bigger than a 4, and there's some left over that's not going to be used. So I can click OK, and it's going to ask me if I want to over-provision the SSDs, which reserves space on the SSDs to improve write performance and disk lifespan. Now, QNAP highly recommends that you do this. So we'll leave that enabled, and I'll leave the default settings 10% over provisioning and an 80% alert threshold. So this is an alert for the use space. So we're going to have a new RAID group of SSDs that's 467 gigs, and we're going to have a new RAID group of a RAID 6 of 6 spinning drives. That's 14.52. My total is going to be 14.93 capacity. It's going to reserve 212 of that for snapshots, for cleaning up disks and doing background activities, which works out to like 1.39%. It's pretty small. And then this will be our unallocated space that's available to us, 14.72 terabytes. So we'll click Create. All of the data on the selected disks will be erased. Are you sure you want to continue? Okay. This may take a few minutes. Please wait. So what it's going to do is it's going to create the RAID array, and it's going to immediately be available to me. But in the background, it's going to be zeroing them out and making them all match, and basically just making the array more efficient. So give this a minute to do its thing. Storage pool 1 created successfully. Qtier will now perform data analysis and tiering automatically. Check the Qtier icon to adjust the tiering schedule or to specify which data will be tiered. Create a new volume to begin storing data. When allocating space for volumes and LUNs, ensure to reserve free space for expansion and continued system operation. So I've created a storage pool. Now I can create volumes inside that storage pool, and I can create multiple volumes to be as big or as small as I want them to be. When you're making a volume, you have 3 different options. You can do static volume, which is kind of the old school way of doing it. Your space allocation is fixed, and it doesn't support snapshots. So snapshots would be like the belt and suspenders, the backups that the QNAP does. A thick volume is going to pre-allocate all of your space, and it supports snapshots. A thin volume is going to allow you to have space allocation on demand. So basically what I can do is a thin volume, and I'll say that I'm on storage pool 1, that's my location. If I had multiple storage pools, I could, pick whatever I wanted to use. Okay, so thin volume, next. You must monitor usage space within thin provisioning. So what this is going to do is I'm going to say that my capacity of my volume is whatever, we'll say 10 terabytes. And I can always grow this over time. I can always shrink this over time. I can adjust it as I see fit. There's an option for file system, whether you want to use 4K blocks or 8K blocks or 16K blocks or 32K blocks. Basically, this is just going to limit the amount of files and the volume size that you can have. So if you choose 4K blocks, that means the maximum size that your volume can ever be is 16 terabytes. If you replace disks, if you do whatever, you would have to blow out and replace the volume to be able to make it larger than that. But you can have 2 billion files and folders. If you go 8K, it doubles the volume size, but it cuts the amount of files and folders in half. 16K doubles it again, cuts it in half again, and 32K doubles it again and cuts it in half again. In my case, I'm going to do 127.99 terabytes. I'm going to do 32K blocks. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because I'm starting off with 6 6s. And my intention is to buy a couple 12s or 14s to fill out those other 2 slots and move my SSD to an NVMe card, which is a card that goes in the back. It doesn't use up the slots then. So I'm going to put my last 2 disks as large, like 12 or 14 terabyte disks, and then over time I'm going to replace my 6s with 12s or 14s, whatever I choose, and just kind of slowly grow it over time. So if I get to the point where I've got 12 terabyte disks and they're in a RAID 6 and there's 8 of them, 8 times 12 would be 96, and then I would lose 2 of them. So I would end up with about 72 terabytes of data storage, which is more than the 63. So there's a possibility that I'll go over this 63 terabytes. So we'll start here. Next, thin provision. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a volume that has the ability to use 10 terabytes of space, but they're going to allocate only the space that's used. So as I move files to it, it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. Now, if you create a multiple thin provision volumes in the same storage pool, you actually have the ability, even though my storage pool is only 15 terabytes, I could say I have a 6 terabyte thin volume and a 3 terabyte thin volume and a 10 terabyte thin volume, and even though that adds up to 19, it'll let me do it. But it'll grow as you add files to it. So eventually you'll run out of free space. So that's what it was saying when you need to manage free space with thin volumes. The cool part about thin volumes, though, is that you always have the additional space available to use at a later date if you want to create another volume. So in this case, I might want to create a 1 terabyte volume for Time Machine, or I might want to create a 1 terabyte volume for Surveillance or something like that, which I'll do in a later video. But so right now it's going to create a volume. It's making it right now. It creates all the default folders, which is like the admin folder, the media folder, the music folder, all of that stuff, which you can delete. And it's in the process of synchronizing the disks. So if we go here to storage, we'll see what it's actually doing, that it's creating default folders, that we have a thin provision, and that our use capacity is nothing, and it's in storage pool 1. If we look at the disks, or actually we want to look at the RAID sync and process on RAID group 2. Go to. So this is what I wanted to show you. So it synchronized the 2 SSDs already because they're only 500 gigs and they're really fast. So it was able to do that pretty quick. RAID group 2, which is the spinning disks, is the large 15 terabyte volume. And it's in the process of synchronizing all of those disks so that all of the blocks are zeroed out and everything is the same across all of the disks. you can still use the array while you're doing it. Like you can add files, it'll work just fine. It'll allow you to store and receive files and everything's great. It does this as a background process, so it has the lowest priority compared to everything else that you're doing. So as you can see, it's synchronizing. It's at half of 1% synchronizing because these disks are huge. Here we can, maybe it won't let me expand that. Okay. So it's at half of 1%, and it's saying there's about 102 hours left before it's done. So it's going to take it about 4 days to synchronize this large RAID 6 group. But during this time, you can, continue to use it as you would see fit. The QNAP is smart enough to read your smart statistics on your disks. So if you look at a disk and you click on disk health, it'll show you all of the smart things about the disk. So smart is an internal monitoring that's built into hard drive. So every hard drive for like the last 15 years has it that I'm aware of. But basically it shows smart information. It shows what the disk reports, the amount of time that it's been powered up, the amount of, it's been on, this one's been on for 2 days and 15 hours. That's how long it's been used in its life. You can test the smart settings right now if you want to, but it'll show you every disk. And it's continuously doing that. Once a week it does a test on all of the disks just to make sure, or whatever frequency you set it to. It does a test on all the disks to make sure that they're good. And if you get any errors, it will report to you that you have errors. The activity light on the QNAP will turn orange and it'll blink and it'll beep at you occasionally. And you can set the alarm thresholds and what it does and all of that if you want to. So it gives you the ability to know if you have a drive that's going to fail at some point in the future. You can click on it and it'll show you, hey, this drive has too many bad sectors, you should replace it. And then if you need to replace it, you go here to the drive and you go to action. Is it action or is it? Well, oh, you do it hot. I'm sorry. You can replace disks hot in a QNAP. So if you have a drive that's failing, you pull it out, you replace it with a new disk, and it's going to rebuild when it detects the new disk. So you just pull it out, but do it with it powered on. Don't power it off. But that's really about it. So I'll do some subsequent videos talking about the camera surveillance channel, some of the multimedia stuff. I'm probably going to virtualize a Ubuntu VM on here, and I'm going to use a couple other things. The built-in time machine to back up my Mac and a bunch of other things. So and we can see right now if we go to this dashboard, it'll show that it's barely breathing. I'm using 14% of my CPU, 37% of my RAM. My RAM is upgradable. It came with 4 gigs out of the box. I can upgrade it to 16, which I'll probably do when I add the large SSD array. So when I finally have this built out, I'm going to have 8 drives that are all at least 6 terabytes. I'm going to have 2, I think I'm going to do 2 terabyte SSDs that are on the card that goes in the back of it. And that'll give me a 2 terabyte SSD tier, and it'll give me a 36 terabyte-ish spinning disk tier. So it'll be a bunch of storage, and then over time, I'll replace the 6 terabyte disks with the 10s or the 12s or whatever I choose, and then I'll be able to, at the end, grow it. So you can replace disks one at a time with larger disks. It won't use the entire disk up front, but once you replace all of the disks, you can expand the capacity to use up all of that space. So they're really, really flexible devices. That's it for today. Have a great day.